Have you ever seen this label and thought to yourself, that just sounds like some silly nonsense? Let me read it to you. Beyond single barrel. The contents of this bottle are not just from one barrel, but a barrel that was hand-picked for its unique taste characteristics. Once it's gone, this distinct flavor profile will never be repeated. You might say to yourself, well, adoy, it's a single barrel. That's what single barrels are. We all know that. Let's take a trip back in time to 2016. It was our first year of release, and someone said to me, hey, you should do some single barrel releases. And I said, I don't know what that means. Well, I shouldn't say what single barrel releases means, but they said you should do some barrel picks. I'd never heard of barrel picks at the time. And I said, okay, let's do some barrel picks. And so I went to the distributor and I said, hey, distributor, we want to do some barrel picks. And they said, how many cases are you going to get? And I told them they're 9-year barrels, 10% average evaporation the first year, and 4% every year after that. So we can expect 40-something% evaporation rate. So it's going to be about 26 to 28 cases. And so they presented it to the sales team. And no one was interested in doing barrel picks. It was not worth the sales rep's time. And I said, what are you talking about? Why is it not worth the sales rep's time? And they said, well, it's because we normally get 150 cases out of a barrel pick. I was like, okay, let's do the math on that. We've got a 53-gallon barrel. You can only get 44 cases out of it, 6-packs I'm talking about, 750 milliliter bottles on day one. Even if I was to proof it down, I could not get even close to 150 cases. I'm going to leave the brand names out of this, but so what it turned out was these other brands had what was called a barrel program. And if you picked what I'm only assuming was a blend, they would give you an empty barrel with it. We finally got past the hurdle of the small case yield. It turned out I went out on my own. I found some retail customers that were interested in it. I'm going to go out of order here because the last story is the best story. So, people were asking me, why did each barrel taste differently? And I said, and this was not the original label, by the way. This was a reaction to all this. And because the first label I had on here, it said like vintage and the TTB. When we originally, the TTB did not like that. It had to say age. So it got rejected. And then I changed the back label to represent all the things that were happening to me. So no one understood why each one tasted differently. And I went, because they'd say, oh, well, this company, when they do single barrels, they all taste the same. I will give you the one example where everything was different and they were absolutely legitimate, and that was Four Roses. Four Roses was doing legitimate barrel picks, legitimate single barrels. But I knew an ex-employee from a different company, and he said, oh, what they do is 10,000-gallon batches, and then they put it in a new barrel for about 30 seconds because it's still bourbon. It's still going in a new charred oak barrel, still bourbon, and then they dump it, and that's their single barrel. And it's full because it got filled up from a batch, and that's why they're all consistent. Sometimes they'd age them for a little longer, but there was a lot of consistency because they would already start with a batch of a bunch of aged bourbon and put them in new single barrels. A lot of that has changed because tours are more popular, and if you saw a bunch of brand new single barrels being dumped out there in Kentucky, well, there would be quite the uproar. You want to hear the worst story? Come here. I went to the buyer for a chain, and I said, hey, this is what's happening. I'm getting a lot of pushback on these single barrels because the case yields are too low. And he said, oh, dude, I'll do your barrels. How old are they? I said, oh, they're 9 years old. He's like, no problem. Just let me know how many I can get. I said, yeah, everybody's complaining because most places, they get 150 single barrels out of them. Now, you might think that the 2 stories I have told you are the worst, but they are not. This is what the world was like in 2016 in this industry, okay? He said that brand reps from big suppliers would come into his stores with a roll of stickers and ask him how many cases he wanted in his barrel pick, and they would put stickers on existing product, and that was his barrel picks. Okay? Again, another reason why something labeled single barrel would be consistent in flavor profile, because big brands are just going to these chains and slapping stickers on existing product. That is the world of bourbon in 2016, and that is what spawned me to write this label filled of explanations for what a single barrel is back then. Because we were a small brand, and even in our sales sheet, we had to like explain evaporation rates and case yields to the salespeople so they understood that these were real single barrels. And that's why it says beyond single barrel, which sounds really stupid now, but still, you gotta understand, there is still no legal definition for single barrel. I can go put single barrel on anything. I already did it. That was one of the first videos I ever did on YouTube, was explaining how single barrel means nothing. It still means nothing. It still means nothing. So single barrel is just a name. It was just a word. It was just an expression. And that's why it says single barrel, beyond single barrel. I probably should have said this is a real single barrel, but I don't think I had the confidence to call out the bullshit in the industry at that time. But yeah, a lot has changed since then. I mean, you want to talk about like what's changed since then. We were putting on distilled in Indiana on the back label before the TTB regulated it. We led the way in transparency. I mean, the amount of brands that switched to a blend of straight bourbons once the TTB started enforcing that, because their stories were bullshit. They were the first distillery in their state since Prohibition. But they weren't. They were just like us, a non-distilling supplier. But once you had to put your state of distillation on the back, the way you get around it is you get multi-state sourced barrels. Then it is a blend of straight bourbons, and you don't need a state of distillation on the back label, and you can go back to telling your BS story about how you named your still Mildred and you're distilling. Oh yeah, we used to source, but now we're not. Now we're distilling ourselves, and there's no way to check them. But that's a different story for a different day, or maybe it is the story for today. I don't know. But that was the environment of 2016, 2017. Obviously, a lot's changed. Most brands are pretty transparent about sourcing or contract distilling. I think now that so many contract distillers have opened up in Kentucky, if they're bottling themselves and their bottling facilities in Kentucky, are they getting it from Bardstown? Are they getting it from Green River? Are they getting it from a different unnamed contract distiller that's opened up in Kentucky? Who knows? They're not really being transparent about it. But, I mean, obviously, MGP, no one's contract distilling with Starlight. So if it says it's still in Indiana, it's pretty much, it's MGP. Ross and Squibb, Seagram's. But that is the story of why the label seems like a bunch of silly nonsense and what it was actually a response to back in 2016 when we were in our infancy and we first started offering barrel picks, not a barrel program, but actual single barrel picks. How the world has changed. Well, thank you for watching this. I hope you learned something today. I'll talk to you later.